Now, we all know stories are an incredible way to spark connections and strengthen and grow communities and to create a shared understanding and make meaning within those communities. But what if that connection, what if that shared understanding was the difference between life or death? Because sometimes, my friends, it is that deep. And luckily for you, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where filmmaking, brand, and business all collide. My name is Bennett, a filmmaker and an author, and for over 2 decades, I've studied how stories actually work on the screen, inside organizations, and most importantly, out in the real world. So each episode, I host one of the world's greatest storytellers to help break down the art and science of storytelling as a system, not just a skill. That means how stories create connection, how they move people emotionally, and ultimately, how they drive action. So if you want to learn to tell stories that do more than just sound good, but they actually achieve something, then this, dear storyteller, is the show for you. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. Today, my guest is Scott Mann, and this is a very unusual episode. Scott was a former Green Beret, and he is a friend of Stephen Pressfield, who is a friend of mine and a friend of the show, who recommended Scott. And he found out, I'll say the hard way, that storytelling, the collaboration and understanding that happens through storytelling, he understood and learned how powerful that is through and on the battlefield. So since he left the service, and he struggled with many of the things that our veterans do, sadly, he started to lean more into those lessons that he learned. He started to learn more about stories and storytelling and how it could continue to create those connections that I mentioned, to strengthen those communities, to create that shared understanding and to make meaning of the world and his path in the world. He understood how to take his scars and his vulnerability and turn that into something positive to help lead other people going through similar issues through storytelling. If that is not the essence of the power of stories, I don't know what is. Now, this guy who was a Green Beret for years and years and years now is an author. He is a speaker, and he's also an actor. He has created a one-man show, multiple shows even. In fact, one's coming to North Carolina in a few months, and I hope to go see it. I plan to go see it. His current book is called The Generosity of Scars, and it talks about how to take these scars that you have, that we all have, no matter how profound and how traumatic, and use them and be generous with them and find not just the silver lining, but flip it on its edge and find the power within them. I talk about this all the time, how to turn your tragic flaw into your superpower. It's very similar to that. It's how to take the things that have hurt you and turn them into something that strengthens you. And that's that's essentially what's happening. If you think about when you're building muscle, you tear the muscle apart, and when it grows back together, it grows stronger. That's how you strengthen and grow your muscles. It's the same thing here. You strengthen and grow your heart, right? Through storytelling, through sharing these scars and these wounds. It's not easy. And there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. So if you're going through something like that, understanding Scott's journey and how he had this epiphany and how he walked this path of letting his story that hurt him be the thing that healed him. Oh, you're going to be blown away by this episode. What a guy. What an amazing human. What an amazing leader. What an amazing storyteller he is. So here's my conversation with Scott Mann, and I hope that you love it. Scott, welcome to the Storytelling Lab, my friend.
Thank you, Ryan. Good to be here, buddy.
I appreciate you. Now, it looks like you're in a hotel right now, living the road life many of us are familiar with.
A road life that I have lived for decades. It has been, yeah. But air travel is not my friend these last couple of days.
It's weird times out there, but you're spreading the good message. I want to talk a little bit about this part of your career. I'm sure we'll get to all aspects of it eventually. Just out of the gate, one of the concepts that I liked most, just on name alone, was the concept of rooftop leadership. And so I'd like to start off today and just let's define that for the folks, because If I get it the way I think that I get it, it kind of embodies the essence of storytelling and the collaborative nature of that as well. So I will let you define it, and then we can pick it apart.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. You, I coined that term actually over in Afghanistan. I was a Green Beret with a couple of tours over there, and we were doing a program at the time called Village Stability Operations, Rain. This was pretty late in the war. This was 2010, and we had already realized we were going the wrong direction in Afghanistan with a lot of top-down, kind of pro-West stuff that just was not resonating. Go figure. But as Green Berets, we had kind of got caught up in the aftermath of 9/11 and the payback that went along with it, and I think we lost our way collectively a bit as well in that the by, with, and through that Green Berets are known for, kind of the Lawrence of Arabia stuff. We had moved away from that, so we'd gotten back to that, and it was not an easy thing to get back to because for years we had really focused on walking the enemy down, surgical targeting, and again, doing like a lot of other special ops units whose primary mission is that. That's not our primary. Our mission is to work by, with, and through indigenous people. Mm-hmm. And so we got back to our roots in 2010, kind of a modern day Magnificent Seven approach, living out in the villages, beards grown out, indigenous garb, and then helping locals stand up on their own against, insurgents that were occupying or trying to occupy their village, and they didn't want them there. And what we got back to and what really astounded me about this approach was these old school Green Beret NCOs, sergeants, who were able to build rapport, reach across with a handshake when the temptation was to reach for your pistol in a tense meeting. And when nobody was looking, they would build these relationships living in these communities with, no power, no running water, and really build deep local connections that were so effective that when, after a couple of months of that, whenever an attack would come on the village, and it always would, because the Taliban feared that more than anything else, was Americans living in the villages. That was where they swam in the sea. All of a sudden, an attack, you would, instead of seeing 10 Green Berets on a rooftop, you'd see 10 Green Berets on a rooftop and 75 farmers on their rooftops fighting back. And it was such a profound thing to see. And as the program manager, I would bring different congressional leaders and senior leaders out to see this, because I'm like, you got to see what's happening out here in these rural areas. This is the way we need to be doing this. And I started calling it rooftop leadership, that ability to move people up onto a rooftop when they don't want to go, when they're scared, when they're afraid. And a lot of it had to do, like you said, human connection and storytelling when risk was low, and then leveraging that when the stakes were high.
Can you pinpoint what might have been said or shared? And obviously, I think this varies from person to person, but in general, that really landed with them and clicked in a way that inspired them to walk through that, even though they were fearful. Does that make sense? Like, was there a point when you were like, because I'm sure you were trying to maybe initiate that, and then there was a point where it worked?
Yeah. There were always, just like in any relationship or any element of social capital, right? Where you're because that's what we do as humans. We build connections with other humans, and that's how we move and get things done. And there were always these kind of small moments that were big moments that you could probably walk it back to. I know for me, for example, in an area called Cockres, it was a really resistant area, and I remember having a conversation, the team leader and myself and a couple other people, with these elders, and they were really obstinate about us moving back in the village. As you can imagine, the retribution that could come with that. Plus, some of their kids were in the freaking Taliban. Like, it was not like we were, ticker tape parade. But I remember just a real resistance to any presence of Americans there. And for days, we sat under this mulberry tree and just had different conversations. And I remember at some point asking one of the elders, because we were just looking for ways to connect, asking them what life was like before the Soviets came.
Wow.
And man, it was like something clicked. He looked at me almost like I had offended him in the beginning. And then his eyes kind of glazed over, and he kind of leaned back, and the other elders kind of looked around like they had not thought about that. You're talking about 40 years at that point, And he started to kind of stumble through the answer a smile started to kind of come across his face. He talked about going to the Blue Mosque up on the hill and not having to, walk because there were bombs on the side of the road, and the lunches that they would have in the grass on Fridays and the kids playing. And it was a completely different thing. And it was before the 40-year war started, and he was basically telling us what life meant to them, what they wanted life to look like before all of these occupations, before all of these invasions. And then the whole conversation just went around that, and it became like, can you talk more about that? How do we get back to that? What do you think that needs to look like? And it was a very, subtle, but that began just a kind of a newly framed conversation where now it was collaborative, and it wasn't the stories we were telling, it was the stories they were telling. And I think that was pretty significant.
When you first answered that question, my involuntary response was wow. And for those listening to this, it may sound simple to just be like, well, what was life like before? But the reason I said wow is like it's one of those simple things that we often overlooked. I mean, this is the essence of storytelling. To understand where we are going, so much of that requires us understanding and being tapped into where we came from or what we came from, right? This is the transformation of all stories, right? It's before and after. I was speaking at a storytelling for startups event just last week, about a week ago today, and with two other great storytellers, and one of them used a framework, because these were all kind of beginners, of like, when you introduce yourself, that cliche question, what do you do? The framework she gave was, past, present, and future. Like, well, I used to do this, and then now I do this, but what I want to do is that. And it gives you a nice little narrative arc of like what you stand for, the change you're trying to affect. And so even though it is simple, it's often overlooked, but that is storytelling right there. And it's very neat to me as a storyteller that's what unlocked it for them. Just like, let's look back, and how they were almost like they didn't know how, or they were a little resistant. But once they did, they started seeing the whole picture. That's such a metaphor right there.
I think so. I agree with you. And I think the other thing is that the stories do so many things, but the way that I've seen them in that context really effective is that, they give us, not only do they give us meaning, but they give us context.
Absolutely.
They give us context. And when we were absent of context for 10 years in that war, we elbowed our way into these places, and we prescribed what it needed to look like, but we didn't have a local contextual view of what really mattered. And in an insurgency, or really in life, right? I mean, I used to tell young Green Berets when I was teaching, is like, go local or go home. If you can't connect locally, and stories is how we do that. I mean, stories, especially if we can ask questions, thoughtful, open-ended questions that let the other party respond in narrative. I found, even in today's times, as divided and as caustic as things can be, stories, if you ask questions that let people respond in narrative, can really bring emotional temperature down. It can give us context. I found it just to be such an amazing bridging mechanism for even like the really dangerous places.
It's so true. It is absolutely something we're missing. There's so much nuance, and context is the word you use, which I think is a perfect word in our communication and discourse and discussions and debates these days. And that's why it just, they fall apart so quickly and get heated so quickly, because of the lack of sharing those narratives. There's so much details in the actual story.
I agree. I would tell you, I think Daniel Pink introduced this term quite a while back, but he didn't come up with it. It was narrative competence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the origins of it actually are in the medical community, which makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, you having narrative competence or bedside manner. But when you think about how stories resonate on the brain, and you think about like the brain makes sense of the world through storytelling, so having a competency for storytelling, purposeful storytelling in real time, that was something I was really adamant, and still really adamant about, in the special forces community, law enforcement. I certainly think any high stakes environment, I mean, we all need storytelling, but narrative competence in certain professions is absolutely essential. Especially when tensions are high, and there's gaps and in groups and out groups, and you're trying to bridge those things. So I guess what I'm saying is, for me, that's where my love of storytelling really came into its origins, was in those low trust places where I saw it do more than any carbine or assault rifle.
Speaking of the past and kind of going back to the origin of our stories, what led you to the Army?
I met a Green Beret when I was 14 in a little logging town in Arkansas, Mount Ida. His name was Mark, and he had come home on leave, and he took the time to sit down with me and talk to me about Special Forces, because I was just enamored with the dude. The way he carried himself, and we didn't get many visitors in a town of 978. And he saw me as an adult, like it's like literally, or that's how he was talking to me, and I was a runt, really bullied as a kid. A lot of just on the outside looking in kind of perspective in life, and just didn't really fit anywhere. And this guy, as he talked about what Green Berets did, and just the cohesion of this little team that could go anywhere in the world and build these relationships. And I just I located myself in the story, as he would talk about it. I located myself in it. And once that happened, it was over at 14, I knew that's what I was going to do. And it never changed. It never deviated. I went through college, got commissioned in the Army, did 4 years in Panama, and then selected in 1995 to go into SF. And I think I failed every school in the Army like 3 times. And finally made it into the Green Berets, and then spent like from 96 all the way to 2013 in SF. And it was just, I told my boys at my retirement ceremony in 2013 that I got to live the life of a dream of a 14-year-old kid, and it was actually better than I thought it would be. Not many people get to say that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was like, how did it play out compared to what you hoped it would be?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I loved the work. I loved the men and the women that occupied that branch, and in the other branches, the SEALs, the Rangers, like the people that I was around. I was just so fortunate to stand on their shoulders. And I mean that. Like, most of what I know about storytelling and human connection, I learned from a lot of friends that aren't around anymore. And so I get to not just tell stories about what they taught me, but I get to keep them alive as well when I teach and train on it. But I would say the only part, Rain, that was not, in 2011, 12, that program I was talking about, we started moving away from it.
Yeah.
We abandoned those villages, directive from the top. And I saw a microcosm of retribution and assassination of what played out in 2021 in Afghanistan when we left for good. And it was overwhelming for me. I could not, that when we left that program, we had made promises to those individuals that we would be with them for the long haul. I had personally, as a program manager, made it clear to my leadership that, like, you break it, you buy it. You can't start something like that. We're looking at 75 years of long-term engagement in Afghanistan in the rural areas. If we do this program, we cannot leave because they're going to be so vulnerable. And all the assurances were given that would be the case, especially for Green Berets, that we weren't going anywhere. And then we bailed. And so for me, that was the cue that it was time to go. I turned down 3 battalion commands and retired earlier than I thought I would as a lieutenant colonel, and moved completely away from the military. Had a very bad transition, and that's probably a different conversation. I'm happy to have it, but that was when the kind of the dream took a different turn.
Yeah.
Was after I came out.
Yeah, that's personally, I am curious about how one navigates that when you're in a system that is very much built on hierarchy, orders, etc., and you start questioning the objective and struggling with that internally. Like, that's got to be challenging to navigate when you feel something here, but you've agreed,
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? You just
Well, my dad, I called him my Ranger buddy, wearing his
uh
shirt today, the leaving track shirt there. But we lost him this summer, and he was like, man, he was my guy, and he was a wildland firefighter, spent 43 years fighting those big fires like you see out west. And he was just, a child of Appalachia. Boy, you talk about a storyteller, Rain. Like this guy,
yes.
man, he did a TED talk at 73 about
Nice.
the restoration of the American chestnut. Uh, but he was always my sage advisor. And he always told me, he said, Scotty, when you stop loving it, it's time to leave. It's time
Yeah.
to exit the stage, and I realized that I wasn't loving it anymore. I did the things that I was being asked to do, the things that were required to move up in the system. I just couldn't do. And so, Monty and I, my wife of 30 years, we prayed on it. And, I just talked to, people that I really trusted, like my dad. And then I made a decision to leave, and I got a lot of flack for it. Particularly with turning down commands, which is
Yeah.
something you just don't do. But I just felt like I could do more on the outside than on the inside. I felt like I was being called to something else. But what I didn't allow for or plan for was that the transition from one world to the next. And I told Steve Pressfield this the last time we talked, I think, it was like changing planets.
Yeah.
You're going from this one planet that is tribal, and it's all about the group, and it's all about taking care of each other and honor, to another world that's not that. It's everything that is not.
Yeah.
You're on your own. It's very transactional. It's just different, and I wasn't ready for that. And as a result of that, I left a lot of my purpose and my identity in the team room, and found myself dealing with things I had not dealt with, like post-traumatic stress, survivor's guilt, moral injury for a lot of people that were assassinated that I had recruited. And I fell apart. In about 18 months, I was standing in my closet holding a pistol. So it got really dark for me really fast. By 2015, I was not in a good place. And so, and a lot of it had to do with just this contradiction of what I thought Green Berets were and what we did, and then what I actually saw my leaders doing. But in reality, a lot of it was just I was not processing and dealing with my own stuff. I think I put a lot of blame on a lot of other things. And but somehow I made my way back to storytelling. And that was really, if I could point at two things, it's my wife and storytelling pulled me out of them.
When did that light bulb go off? Because I'm sure it was a long process of like hitting that kind of quote unquote rock bottom, that dark moment that you just painted the picture for us about. I'm sure it wasn't like the next day you woke up and all of a sudden you're in a new world again. But can you recall when you had the idea of like, oh, maybe leadership through storytelling? Like,
yeah, you know what it was? See, here's the thing, Rain. I knew I was looking around as I came home from service, and I really looking for the first time at my homeland, and all of the division and the disconnection that was out there. Over in Afghanistan, I would call it the churn, but I still call it that. Like this
good word. Yeah.
Of just tribalism in so many ways. And I saw that, and I'm like, I can actually help with this, because I was craving relevance. I'd gone from being this high performer doing, big things in foreign lands to basically a guy padding around his house in his bathrobe and not showering, and just cursing the world. And I felt like there was something relevant for me waiting in this ability to help people lead through this distrust, this churn at home. I mean, I actually had a skill set and taught in our schoolhouse at Bragg on how to build rapport when there's none, how to bridge trust gaps when they're vast, how to use old school interpersonal skills to ask questions. Like I knew that, but the problem was now, whenever I would get up in front of people where I was so confident in Afghanistan, so confident in the military, that confidence was gone. I would have like massive stage fright, massive anxiety. I would pull back. Even getting in front of veterans terrified me. So while I had on the one hand, this really strong craving to get up in front of people and talk about what I knew, I couldn't do it physically. And finally, it was a mentor of mine, and he wasn't even a veteran. He knew I was wanting to get on platforms and do that kind of thing, and he suggested this event. And I don't really go to events that much. It was an event out in California, and for speakers. And I thought at this point, what the hell, everything, I've got nothing to lose. So I went to this thing and everybody there was like 22 years old, and I'm like 41. I'm sitting here going, what am I doing here? But this guy at the very last speaker, his name was Eason. He came out on stage, former NFL football player. I introduced him and Steve. They know each other pretty well, but Bo came out on the stage, and I swear, Rain, it was like seeing Mark in the soda shop again, man. He talked about playing in the NFL and wanting to do that since he was a kid, and then blowing his knee out for the 7th time. And as he was being carried off the field, he said to himself, I'm going to go to prison because the only thing I know how to do is hurt people. And I thought, oh, dear God, that's me, and he became an actor and then a playwright and then wrote a one-man play that went off Broadway called Run of the Litter. And now he was up on the stage talking about the storytelling. And I was like, holy, and I located myself in what he was doing. And I had no idea how to do it. It terrified me, but I went up to him afterwards and I just talked to him, and he was crowded with people, as you might imagine, like everybody. And he saw me just like Mark did that day. And he like kind of called me over and we talked, and I told him, and I was a wreck. I mean, I was a friggin' wreck. And he saw it and he's like, I'm going to help you, man. And that dude worked with me, Rain, for he's still my mentor. Like, so is Mark, but he worked with me for 2 years, just poured himself into me. And I have to say, that guy, he just changed my life, saved my life probably, and really showed me the physical side of storytelling, more than just the design, but the delivery and how to really integrate with your body and how to bring that to life. And he showed me how to work through the anxiety and fear to get back on the stage. And that, that was, you asked for that moment. That was it. Seeing him up there doing that, I knew that was what I needed to be doing.
Are you familiar with Brene Brown and her take on vulnerability and courage?
100%.
Kind of being the flip side of the coin. She always tells this story about speaking to a group of military leaders who push back on the idea of vulnerability. And she was just like, what's more vulnerable than a military operation if you're behind enemy lines? And I think that finally resonated. I mean, you're painting a different picture, a different world, different situation with speaking versus being a Green Beret, but vulnerability is vulnerability. Our brain processes, fear and anxiety the same way. Talk to me a little bit about that relationship between vulnerable, fear, and then having the courage to work through it. And from your experience, it often sounds like a mentor tends to help.
It does. I'll tell you, I'm glad you asked that about the vulnerability piece, because it's something that I'm fascinated with, because I still teach, a lot of what I teach and train on is around what I call the human operating system. This primal system that hasn't changed much in a couple 100,000 years. When it's under pressure, it performs in very unique and interesting ways. And the more we can understand our nature, our operating system, I think the more relevant and relatable we can be to those we serve. The reality, though, is it seems like most of it is below. If we were an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is the modern world where we live, work, and play. It's this podcast, but and that's like 20% of our humanity. Like below the waterline is 80% of our operating system is what I call a meaning-seeking, emotional, social storyteller who struggles. A mess. We're a mess, and a lot of our primal levers, like meaning and emotional temperature and social proclivity, like these are primal things. And the more we can understand them and be connected to them, I think the more we can show up in these modern moments completely authentic and differentiated from those around us in a very relevant way, not in a transactional or manipulative way, but in an authentic, hey, we're glad you're in the room kind of way. And so getting to relate to vulnerability, one of the things, I had a hard time with vulnerability too. And the reason was because, like, in my previous line of work, if you just took vulnerability like as an end game, if I would have just been vulnerable in front of those elders, that's a good way to get your jugular cut. Like you can't just being vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable was difficult. And what I found for me, and what I talk about a lot today, and it seems to resonate with folks, is we are social creatures. Our
Yes.
superpower is actually we don't have fur, fangs, or claws. We are wired to connect with other humans, and being relatable, I have found, is the intention that I love. Can I be relatable to this person right now? Can I be relatable to my son or daughter who's dealing with this problem at school? And just that's my intention is can I be relatable? Can I connect there and really meet them where they are, not where I want them to be? And I found that if I do that, and that's my intention that I set before the engagement, then vulnerability comes alongside me in an appropriate way. And so now vulnerability becomes a byproduct of relatability. Because, for
Hmm.
example, like you and I so if I was having a conversation on struggle and storytelling,
Hmm.
and on Tuesday I'm talking to corporate bankers, and on Thursday I'm talking to Purple Heart combat wounded veterans and Gold Star family members, like I'm going to talk vulnerability in both,
Yeah.
but their levels are going to be different, but what's going to be consistent is relatability.
Yes.
If that, I don't know if that makes sense,
No,
but
it makes perfect sense, and I love the way you phrase it. That's so good because we talk a lot about vulnerability in the storytelling world, and what we'll continue to talk about. I know the aspect of scars is really important
yeah,
to your platform, and so vulnerability is embedded in storytelling, right? There's always
yes,
going to be a conflict that we overcome, and we're always going to be resistant to it, and then we have to have this, either change of perspective or lesson learned that helps us overcome it. So it is embedded in it, but I think that's a really good way to frame it. And you said something like not vulnerability for vulnerability's sake.
right,
That leads me to a kind of a follow up question. This is a question I get a lot. I've worked a lot with nonprofits over the years. I mean, my background's a documentary filmmaker, and that tends to lead itself to a lot of
yeah,
nonprofit work because this cause driven, purpose driven. Even now, I still speak at a lot of nonprofit events, and a very common question, Scott, that I get is because some of these people are working with organizations that are dealing with that are serving people that are dealing with a lot of trauma.
yeah,
And so when I'm talking to them about how to employ storytelling as a strategy, one of the questions I often get is, yeah, but how do we do that when we're dealing with, I mean, it might be HIPAA compliance. It might just be like,
yeah,
children they're working with, information they don't want to get across. And also they want to ride that line between, being vulnerable and evoking emotion, but not oversharing with the super heavy, super dark stuff in a way where it pushes people away almost, if that makes sense. Or they're dealing with a privacy issue,
yeah.
and they can't share too much. So the direct question is, where is the line, in your opinion, between vulnerability and in your storytelling, and perhaps oversharing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way that I try to come at it, and I'm a founder of a nonprofit
Okay.
called Task Force Pineapple, and we use storytelling to help warriors, first responders, and veterans find their voice and tell their story. Now, that's not my primary gig. It's like you, I have
Mm-hmm.
two flagships that I fly there, but I spend a lot of time in the nonprofit space, and I've certainly spent a lot of time around what you're talking about. And
Mm.
here's my take on it. When I was in that dark place with a pistol under my chin and walking around my house wondering if my family would be better off without me, I didn't give a damn about HIPAA or anything else. What I knew was that life didn't make any sense to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't feel relevant, and I was lost. What storytelling gave me was, in the beginning, it allowed me to make sense of things that didn't make sense. Like,
Yes.
it allowed me to put perspective onto things that I didn't have, and it reframed things. It gave my brain new patterns, and that's why I like kind of the scientific approach to storytelling too, when we look at it as a craft, because we know now through neuroscience things that we just didn't know before, and it confirms a lot of things that our grandparents knew to be true. But storytelling is how the brain makes sense of the world, right? The brain has a mandate to make sense of the world, and it does it through metaphor. And so it's something we've been doing way before a lot of these modern concerns or whatever that we have. Now, I'm not diminishing what you're saying, because actually it's a very good question. I guess what I'm saying is that when I was in that place, it was the pure form of storytelling that allowed me to make sense of things that didn't make sense,
Yes.
and then eventually use storytelling in the service of others to repurpose my own trauma, my own guilt, my own scars, to allow people to locate themselves in my story and do that autobiographical listening that happens when we hear a story told. And I'll just give you one quick example, but like for me, that nonprofit work, it got me to running storytelling workshops for trauma victims, for Gold Star family members, for first responders. I mean, I have sat with people that have just been through just literally living hell over and over again, helping them find their voice and tell their story. I always have a clinician with me, Dr. Diego Hernandez, that's right there with me. He's a story coach and a psychologist, so that we can, responsibly move through that narrative journey. But the idea is not therapy. The idea is resolution through the story. It's not therapy. It's kind of like vulnerability. That's a byproduct. The idea here is, what's the story? And if it's too white hot and it's too much, sympathetic nervous system kicking in, then we just don't do that point. We do another one. But the idea is that if we can build that narrative muscle, that narrative competency, then what happens is we start to make sense of things that didn't make sense, and then it becomes a way of being in the world. So I ended up writing a play, Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret, that I just felt led to put into the world because it told the story of so many Green Berets and sergeants and their families. And anyway, we traveled around the country, 28,000 miles on a U-Haul van, no idea what we're doing, all veteran cast. And we performed in Chicago at this little community theater. And this lady named Holly happened to be in town for a class reunion. She had lost her son, Danny, in Afghanistan in 2010 when I was there. He was an explosive ordnance guy, killed by an IED. And she had been in a fog ever since then. And mind you, this is like 2019. She was just in a fog. But she went to this reunion and they said, hey, there's this play. You should go. She almost didn't go. She had a few drinks and decided to go. She watches the play. Guess what the lead character's name is that I play? Danny. And so she's watching, and it's about Danny losing his life in Afghanistan and trying to ascend to Valhalla, but he's stuck, and his buddies come down and help him figure out what he's holding on to. It's like It's a Wonderful Life with body armor. And so Holly watches this play. She's so moved by it at the end. She comes up to us. She's just falling apart in tears. I talk her into coming to a storytelling workshop. Months later, she comes. We get through the story. It's rough, but Doc Diego's right there with her. She eventually ends up becoming a story coach, now using that story to open up our workshops. And then just this past fall, she was the first Gold Star mom to ever give a TED Talk. But you know what didn't change? The story. The story has been the through line. And now, instead of her being the beneficiary of the story, she's the helper, and the audience is the beneficiary. So that's how I look at it, and I look at it as it's an innate tool that we've been gifted. It's a biological gift. And the more we can integrate it into our lives responsibly, the more I think we can lead.
How good does that make you feel to see her trajectory through that? I mean, it's like, it's got to be so fulfilling.
Well, it keeps me alive, honestly, right? It's what keeps me alive. It's what keeps me going. And it's not, I see it over, and it's not just Gold Star mothers. It's not, look, none of us have the market cornered on struggle or scars.
Lord, no. Oh, man.
And what about you? How did you get into storytelling? What you're doing?
Yeah. So, I have always been a writer and a film lover, and as I told you, I've been doing documentaries since 20 years or more now.
Yeah.
But how I got into really breaking down and working with people through stories is after my first feature documentary that was kind of my labor of love, that dragging a weight up a mountain for 5, 6, 7 years. We sold it, had a happy ending, but I was pretty exhausted after that, and so I started looking at the lessons that I learned, which I've never been very technical as a filmmaker or anything. I'm more of a big picture visionary, and so the lesson, my philosophy on storytelling is in terms of filmmaking is it's less about the production value and the gadgets and the tools, and more about the skill of connecting with your audience.
Yeah.
So focus on that first, and then you can add tools to the toolbox and make it better production-wise. But unless you have a good story, it's not going to resonate anyway. Whereas a lot of my peers and contemporaries are always looking like, ooh, what camera's that? And I always had this saying of it's the man, not the machine, right? Because a great photographer can take an iPhone and produce a beautiful image, because the skill is the art, not the the technical tools that you use. And so at that time, a lot of brands were being tasked with having to create content because now you got all these social media channels. But many or most of them certainly weren't professional filmmakers or writers or artists. So I started working with them to help reveal their story. I've done a lot of one-on-one coaching too. But then I just got really obsessed with the things that we're talking about, just the power of stories as it applies to humanity.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I really nerd out about, because every conversation I've had on this show, which is now going on 8 years, over 200 episodes, every person or brand that I've helped, like, it always comes back to the story that we tell ourselves. Always. No matter if this is like a Academy Award winning screenwriter or a global, a Fortune 500 marketer, storytelling is storytelling, and there's so much of ourselves wrapped up in it. So anybody that I help with it, it's always unlocking something they're going through, and that's the thing that fulfills me too, just like with the story that you just shared.
Love that.
And so as I've gone on, I still help, a lot of brands, but the kind of stuff that we're talking about is the stuff that really like moves me on a deeper level. I've had a kind of a traumatic childhood myself, and so there's a lot of darkness and trauma. If we can help save people from those moments, like the moment that you discussed, like that's really important to me, and the kind of stuff that really lights my heart on fire.
I love that, man. And you know what I found? I was so blessed to get into the acting side of things, because that, you talk about the ultimate midlife crisis at age 50, like, I never thought I would do that. And the only reason was I wanted to tell my own stories that I was writing.
Yeah. And
I thought the stage was just the place to do it. I was in love with one man shows but here's what I was going to go with that is what I found in the theatrical world is that actors, they have such a craft, particularly stage actors, for dealing with tension and metabolizing trauma, and even referring to our body and our voice and our mind as the instrument.
Yeah.
I thought I just fell in love with that. And so what I've tried to do is to try to migrate some of those physical delivery aspects of the primal storytelling. Because if you look at indigenous storytellers, if you look at really good actors or just storytellers who have been doing it for a while, like, they are completely available when they tell the story. The instrument is clear, the body is integrated, and I found that helps a lot with the trauma, the struggle, is when you can metabolize that tension in the body and just let the body loose, as Eason says. There's such a profound discovery that the instrument makes in the story, and it kind of starts to align in your body. And now, instead of the story owning you, you start to own the story. But I think there's a real physical piece to storytelling too, particularly oral storytelling, that probably excites me more than anything as far as the craft goes.
Absolutely. You just said a line that I had actually written down preparing for this podcast, that about owning the story versus the story owning us. And I really love that. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give full credit to Dr. Diego on that, because it came up in a story workshop we were doing with combat veterans, and the idea is that the way that he put it forward is that our brain works in stories. Stories how we make sense of the world, yes. And so it's not a matter of whether or not there's a story. The question is, it comes down is to ownership, and if you don't do the work on the story and integrate the story into some kind of sense making, then the story will, particularly around trauma and grief and things like that, it will remain with this kind of singular point of view, and it can be harmful because it owns you, it drives you, it dictates you. Whereas if you actually work through a narrative process, in other words, we write using the hero's journey oftentimes as a framework, but I actually believe that when we go through storytelling, if we do it in the service of others, we actually go through a hero's journey as we do it, right? So there's a struggle to resolution journey that happens as you birth the story, and so that resolution oftentimes equates into you owning the story. You're now in a place where Holly's in a place where now she can walk into the red circle, or she can sit down with another Gold Star family member and share her story in such a way, her scars, that they're now in the service of others. And now they're helping other people locate themselves in the story, make sense of things that don't make sense. And I think honestly, that's what we've been doing with stories for 100,000 years. It's just we've become so damn modern and so obsessed with everything else, we've forgotten that primal component of storytelling. And I think that's really what Doc meant by it, was that if you can own your story, then you can put it to work for others.
Absolutely. Switching gears for a moment, when you were kind of outlining the one-man show, the play that you created. So I saw your TED Talk. You basically, that was like an excerpt, or when you did the TED Talk?
Right. So I've done two plays. That TED Talk, The Generosity of Scars, which is my focus on storytelling, repurposing our stories in the service of others. What I decided to do was a couple of scenes from my play Last Out. That was my first play that you saw in the TED Talk.
Got it. Yeah.
And then when recently in 2021, when Afghanistan collapsed, I stood up a group called Task Force Pineapple that helped evacuate Afghans out of Afghanistan, along with a lot of other groups that stood up. Wrote a book on it called Pineapple Express, and then decided that story needed to be told. I'd always wanted to do a one-man. And so over the last 13 months, I've written a second play called 11 Days, the story of Operation Pineapple Express. And we're now touring the country with that play, and just going to theaters all over the country to help people understand the broken promise that happened and the impact it's had on our veteran population, and the importance of honoring promises when we work with allies and partners.
What do your buddies from the Green Berets think when they see you on stage as an actor now?
You know, the way it's been received has been so cool, man. I was petrified when I first started studying acting in 2018. I would sneak up to New York and study with Carl Bury and Laurie Lame. I didn't tell anybody, and I was so terrified of the whole crabs in a bucket thing. And but I mean, there's a few haters, I guess, but that's always the case. But for the most part, my community has just they've been so proud of me. They've been so supportive of me. They've sponsored plays. They've hosted me. They always come to the shows. The Special Forces Association, the Green Beret Foundation, they all come to the shows and support and stay after, and they're very grateful. They're very grateful because they feel like, and they're right. I'm telling, this isn't my story. This is their story. This is their spouse's story. This is their kid's story. And I'm just a vessel, and I just get the honor to tell it. So they've been really great. And not just the SF guys, the SEALs, the Rangers, because once you watch 11 Days, 3 minutes in, you're like, oh, this isn't about a Green Beret at all. Like this is a universal story of friendship and, and sacrifice and service. It has nothing to do with the branch. So it's been really great, man. They've been very supportive.
Something I want to ask, a lot of times civilians are aware or somewhat aware of the struggles that veterans go through as they transition back. Mm-hmm. I think many of them that are aware want to do something, want to feel like they can do something, and maybe aren't sure what that is, or they feel hopeless, or whatever. I've also talked with a lot of people in the medical world who feel like stories need to be shared because of a lot of the, and I'm talking about providers, a lot of the mental health struggles that they have because of their positions. Same with veterans. And so my question is, on a macro scale, what would you like to see happen? In terms of using storytelling to help veterans. You're doing everything that you can, but you're a single person. Is there a system that you would like to see in place that you think might be somewhat effective at helping veterans navigate post-service?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at a meta level, I would love to see storytelling. There was a survey that was done after the collapse in Afghanistan. We said 81% of the Afghan war population that fought felt betrayed by that withdrawal. Politics aside, 81%, man. And, you take that, you take the Vietnam generation, like that's not good. And what I would love to, so in this survey, they found that they asked the questions that an amazingly high number of both civilians and veterans felt that community events that emphasized storytelling were more highly favored than parades, monuments, thank you for your service stuff. And And I thought that was very profound. And then another buddy of mine did his PhD dissertation on coming home from service. And I asked him, I was like, what's your major conclusion? Or he said, really, man, it comes down to this. He's like, most veterans don't need drugs and therapy. Some need therapy, but what we really need and what we really want is to be connected to our neighbors, to hear our stories heard without judgment, and then to walk the path home with our neighbors at our shoulder. And I thought, man, like, damn. And so that's why we do the plays, because when we perform 11 days, like we were just in Columbiana, Ohio, voted the friendliest place on earth by I think it was People magazine. But we performed the play there. But you know what, Rain, you know what was so cool, man, was we do a talk back after the show. I come back out on stage and people are wrecked by the show. They're emotional. There's civilians, there's veterans, there's military family members, there's kids that have never been around the military that don't remember 9/11, but everybody's sitting together, and you got this one quiet special operator who raises his hand at the end and he says, that was my life up there. And I've been trying for years to try to figure out how to tell my son, what it was like. And you just showed him. And thank you. And it's like that. And then the conversation starts to go out to the audience and they're just talking to each other. And to me, that's, I'm one person and it's small, but I think the idea that that's available to all of us at a community level, those three things that I said, like that's whether we're a civilian or a veteran, that's available to all of us. And I think the only way it's going to happen is bottom up, peer to peer. It's not going to be top down. It's not going to be a nonprofit. It's going to be kind of a collective reckoning that's what we have to do as a civil society.
And it'll take people leading by example like you are. I mean, the pushback of that, I'm just one person is it's the ripples, right? The ripples in the pond. Like, I mean, so, and it's exponential. Like, what was the name of the lady, the Gold Star mother? Holly? Yeah. Like, that's what I meant by when I asked, like, how fulfilling was that for you to watch? Because that's I feel like why we're in it, right? To make that transformation and that's how you grow it, right? It's exponential. You help out 3 people, they help out 3 people, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and I'll tell you this too, for anybody that's thinking about their own story, thinking I don't have a story, my story's not good enough, I don't know how to tell it, or it's not important, no one wants to hear it.
Yes.
I will tell you, last out, the first play I did in 2019, it took me 4 or 5 years to get that thing up. We funded it ourselves. My wife and I did. We drove around in a U-Haul van. We traveled with Doc Diego. We did 250 PTS counselings in the lobby. We performed in cafeterias, high school gyms. And, there were times when I was like, man, no one cares about this story. You look out in the audience, there's like 8 people, But what I will tell you is in 2022, after the Afghanistan collapse, I ended up going on the news and was talking about the play. And a guy from the Five for Fighting dude, John Ondrasik, saw it, reached out to me, got me connected to Gary Sinise. Gary Sinise watched the play and ended up sponsoring the play for an entire year. Nice. And took us to a whole different level. And I remember one night in San Diego, we performed the play. Gary was sitting out in the audience. It's an all veteran cast up there on the stage. None of us are professional actors except for one. And I remember thinking the origins of this play was me standing in a closet with a pistol under my chin. And I couldn't even talk to my kids or my wife about it. Right. And now look at where this thing is. And I'm not, and I didn't even start acting until I was 50. And the point is that, like, it has nothing to do with that. It's like you said, it has to do with the story, and stories are not about us anyway. They're in the service of the audience, and that's the key.
Yeah, man. Oh, you struck a nerve with that one. I say that so much. Is like a story in itself, like, inherently has no power by itself, like in a vacuum, in a silo. The power lies in the recipient, right? And the impact that it has on the recipient. That's why I talk so much about it being a collaborative thing, and the listening aspect of storytelling is equally, if not more, important. It's totally a relationship. I'm so glad that you landed there. Before we go, I definitely want to talk about the generosity of scars. But first, to lead into that, why do you say a scar is a gift? How do we use that gift?
Well, because, Daniel Coyle in the Little Book of Talent, he says that when our brain faces new challenges, it has to build new neural pathways. And and that clunky, ugly feeling that we have when that's happening is by definition struggle. And Coyle goes on to say that struggle is not something that happens to a couple of us or a few unfortunate souls. It is a biological necessity. It is a universal singular. And, at the end of the day, no struggle, no story. Struggle to resolution is the secret sauce of how we all come together, find each other, make sense of the world, locate ourselves in each other's stories, see what's possible for our lives, move past our trauma. But it starts with struggle. You got to earn the right to talk about resolution. And the way you earn it is by demonstrating yourself as relatable through struggle. And so I think that there's generosity in a scar. But you've got to be, if scar is metaphor for struggle, then you got to be willing to pay that price. You have to be willing to talk about the stories that you don't want to tell others, you don't want to tell yourself, because they're not about you. They're about, because what that does is it makes you relatable to the other party. And that woman goes, oh, wow, she's been through what I've been through. And now we start to see what's possible for our own life, and we start listening autobiographically. We start processing our own lived experience in the safety of someone else's story. And to me, like, what's more generous than that?
This is the second time you've said that autobiographical listening, and I think it was on your TED Talk where you mentioned Dr. Kendall Haven.
Yeah.
With that term, can you elaborate on what that means to listen autobiographically?
Yeah, like, so when I get up on stage, or I'm talking about, when I was talking about losing my dad to cancer, and what I typically find is when I tell the story about how he talked about leaving tracks in the world, people will come up to me afterwards and they will talk about how they were thinking about their sister, or they were thinking about their brother, or they were thinking about their own battle with cancer, or crap, I hope I don't get cancer. But what is wild about storytelling as a biological gift is that when we hear, if I walk into the campfire 10,000 years ago and I'm like, all right, let me tell you why saber-toothed tigers make crappy pets, and I'm all bloodied up. Everybody around the fire listens in, right? And by the time the story's done, you feel like you were in the fight with the tiger, and you're remembering moments from your own life where that happened. And so you're listening autobiographically. You're listening to their story, but you're processing your own lived experience in the safety of their story. You're sense making. And that's what, to your point, what you said about it's how the audience receives it. You never know how they're going to receive it. You never know what they're going to find or take away, because they're listening autobiographically. They are the protagonist in the story. They're processing their own experience as the story is being told. And there's just a real beauty in that, I think, because what it does is it accelerates trust, and it gives us a sense of each other. And I think ultimately it breeds reciprocity, where, like, if you see someone who really speaks with generosity and they put it out there and the audience just comes up at one time, just like, wildly connected to them, I think it's because they've made sense of so much of their own life. And that's just such a generous act to do that, because it's hard. It's hard to talk about our struggles. It's hard to talk about the stuff that scuffed us up, but it's not about us. If we talk about it in the service of other people, and we do it in such a way that we let them find what they need. And I learned that actually in Alcoholics Anonymous. Ironically, like, it's not new. You know what I mean? Like, I can't claim it. But I do think there's really something to it.
Absolutely. So at this point, you've written multiple plays, TED Talk, multiple books. What are you focused on next? What can you accomplish next?
Well, thanks. You tell me first.
Well, pal, with my background, what I see when you talk is a feature film.
Oh, no, I meant for you, what you're doing.
Oh, for me?
Hey, okay.
No, buddy. We're here in service of you, my friend.
I really want to take the play off Broadway.
Yeah.
Because I think it could do a lot of good, and I want it to be taken seriously.
For sure.
So we're going to work really hard to take 11 days off Broadway, and so we're going to tour the country and try to get there in 27, 28. My book, Generosity of Scars, is coming out May 12th. And I really want that, because it's written in such a way that it helps people write their own scar story. And I'm excited about that. People can self-implement and write their own scar story and put it into the world. And the last thing, man, is I'm just working with a lot of storytellers. I'm 57 now. I'm trying to come off the road other than my play.
Heard that.
And
Yeah.
I've got a program where I'm doing, it's called Take the Mic, and I just help people that want to put their story into the world in a really profound way, one to many. Is just pouring myself into them. I love doing that. It's like a remote program of training, and that just fills me up. I just love training other people to be storytellers.
And I think there's a massive audience for that. I can't tell you over 20 years how many people, whether we found each other through nonprofit or brand storytelling or whatever, have come up to me saying like, I just have this thing in me that I need to get out.
It's like,
and that's why I started. Yeah. That's why I started doing one-on-one coaching during the pandemic, was because so many people have that story about their story, if that makes sense.
And we need it.
Yeah,
and
dude.
We need it.
Yeah, there are people out there that absolutely need it, and that's why that the doing it in the service of others is so important, and that I think helps people unlock it. That fearful part of sharing their own story, that vulnerable part that we talked about, is once you flip the script and realize that it's like, oh, it's not really about me at all.
Yeah,
it does allow you to drop that shield a little bit that people kind of put up when they armor up, so to speak.
Well said, man.
For me, what's next? I've got a book coming out this year too, a little bit later. So that's what I'm focused on, and now I'm shifting from nonfiction to writing and directing my own narrative films. So some changes coming to me as well, and I love talking to people like you and our buddy Stephen Pressfield, those that kind of found new lives. I don't want to say later in life, sounds weird, but you had a whole life in the military, and then now here you are with this completely other story that started around what you said, around 50.
Yeah.
I mean, I love those stories. My mom was the same way. My mom didn't start her career until age 50, and she killed it. She's still working full time. She's like 75, 76. That story is always inspiring for me. And so I'm 44 this year, and entering one of those big life pivots where I've been doing something for about 20 years, and I'm about to,
I love it, man. My dad, he up until the time he died, he was all in for restoring the American chestnut and giving a larger voice to indigenous tribes to be stewards of our native species. And man, he went all the way, like he skidded that car in sideways, and I just loved it, and I got to walk that path with him. And so hats off to your mama, man. I think that's, and anybody, like, and the cool thing is, like you said, it's the stories we tell ourselves. Once we get that narrative in our head for where we're going, you've got new patterns for the journey, and that's all you need, really, man. Everything else is just details.
Absolutely. Well, brother, I appreciate you being here, and I gotta say, I'm very proud of you as a person who's familiar with darkness in their family and addiction and lots of trauma. It's very inspiring to hear your story. Not only I love that you landed in the storytelling space and what you're doing there, but if we go back in time, it takes a big person to be able to walk away and look back and have a vision based on that. So I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. We got to get you to a show at some point.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You guys happen to come to North Carolina or in the East Coast anywhere around here?
We do. Where in North Carolina are you?
I'm in Durham, right in the middle.
Bro, we're gonna be in Morganton.
Okay, up in the kind of the mountains.
It's not that far.
Nothing's too far. Like the beach is 2 hours, the mountains are 2 or 3 hours. So
we're going to be in Morganton in November. I can tell you it's November 10th, and I'll get you the details. But I would love for you to come as my guest.
Oh, I'll be there. I absolutely be there, man. I love what you're doing. I think it's so cool and such a great way to share these stories, these veteran stories that need to be heard. I love that you're on stage with it, man. Because you could have written the book, you could have done a movie, but I love the in-person theater performance. That's amazing.
Thank you, pal.
I'll be there, brother.
All
Appreciate you, Scott.
Okay, take care.
My name is Rain Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab.